My daughter Lila sat on the edge of the couch, her small legs swinging gently, her eyes wide with hope. All around her, the room shimmered with the kind of holiday noise people dream about. Wrapping paper flew through the air. Cousins laughed and screamed with delight. Someone held up a sparkling pink tablet. Another shouted with joy as a remote-controlled drone took flight across the hallway. The scent of cinnamon and pine filled the space. It looked like a perfect Christmas. Lila didn't reach for anything. She just waited, her hands folded neatly in her lap, a little smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. She was patient, trusting. She believed in kindness. She believed that grandmothers loved their grandchildren and that every child had a gift under the tree with their name on it. I believed it too. Or I wanted to. I kept glancing under the 12-foot tree in Elaine's polished foyer. Surely there was something tucked behind the bigger boxes. Maybe Lila's was hidden. Maybe it had fallen behind the tree's skirt. When the last package was handed out, and she was still sitting there empty-handed, I felt my stomach twist. My daughter turned to me and whispered softly, "Did Grandma forget me?" I smiled, tight and uncertain, and stood up. "Elaine," I called across the room, my voice as light as I could manage. Was there maybe one more gift? One might have gotten missed.
She didn't hesitate.
She didn't even blink. She just looked at me, then at Lila, and said, "She's not really family." Her voice was even, cold, not cruel in tone, but clinical, like she was stating a fact about the weather. "She's adopted," she added. "It's not the same." And Lila heard every word. My heart stopped. My mouth opened, but no words came out. The air in the room went silent, thick with the weight of something that should never have been spoken out loud. I looked around. No one said anything. One cousin tugged on a ribbon. My sister-in-law looked down and began gathering wrapping paper into a trash bag. My husband Ethan sat beside me, jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might break a tooth. But he didn't speak. No one did. Lila didn't cry. She didn't ask again. She simply nodded, just once, as if that made sense now. As if that explained why she didn't belong. She looked down at her small hands and folded them a little tighter in her lap, like she was trying to shrink herself into invisibility. That was the moment something cracked in me. A soundless, invisible split. We stayed.
I don't know why.
We stayed for dinner. We went through the motions. Lila never mentioned it again. She smiled when prompted. She helped carry plates. But her light was dimmed. And I couldn't stop replaying that moment in my mind. The sharpness of Elaine's voice. The echo of silence that followed. The unbearable weight of every adult in that room choosing politeness over protection. That night, back in the guest room, Ethan opened his suitcase and pulled out a manila folder. His face was unreadable, but his movements were deliberate. He sat on the edge of the bed, looked at me, and said, "I brought this just in case. I hoped I wouldn't need it." He didn't wait for questions. He zipped up his coat, folder in hand, and left the room just after midnight. I sat beside Lila as she curled under the blanket, her teddy fox tucked beneath her chin. She didn't ask for a bedtime story.
She didn't ask to call Santa.
She just stared at the ceiling, quiet and still. Her eyes shimmered in the dim, nightlight glow. "Mom," she whispered. "Yes, baby." "Do you think maybe she didn't know I was coming?" My throat closed. I had to swallow twice before I could answer. "She knew," I said softly. "Oh." Her voice was small. "Maybe she just doesn't know me yet." I didn't know how to respond. My heart was breaking in real time. I brushed her hair gently, nodded, and said, "That might be it, sweetheart. But none of this is your fault. Do you hear me?" She nodded again, but her face turned into the pillow. I stayed with her until her breath deepened. When Ethan returned, he didn't say a word. He just placed the folder on the dresser, took off his coat, and lay beside me in the dark. We didn't speak, but I felt something in him. Not rage, not sadness. Something colder, firmer, final. That folder, I hadn't needed to look inside. I already knew. It was Lila's adoption decree. Legal documents. Guardianship records. proof that she was ours in every way that mattered. I also knew Ethan had added her name to everything months ago. Our home, our life insurance, our will. He had been ready long before this night. He had waited. And now he had acted. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing. The woman who claimed Lila wasn't family was about to find out exactly how wrong she was. The house was quiet when Ethan stepped outside, but not the kind of peaceful quiet we'd hoped for when we made the long drive to North Carolina. This silence was tight.
Heavy.
The kind that follows something being broken, but no one willing to sweep the glass. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the foot of Lila's bed, watching her chest rise and fall, her small frame bundled beneath her blanket, Teddy Fox held tight in her arms. My hands trembled in my lap, not from cold, but from the helpless rage that still hadn't found a voice. Rage at Elaine, yes, but also at myself. For staying quiet. For not standing in that moment and saying exactly what needed to be said. I heard the front door creak open and close just before 1 a.m. Ethan returned without a word. He placed the manila folder back in his suitcase and sat on the edge of the bed, his back to me. I reached out and placed my hand on his shoulder. Did you talk to her? I asked. He didn't turn around. I didn't go to talk, he said. I went to give her a choice. I didn't press further. Whatever was said, it had been enough to silence him more than usual. The next morning was different.
Still.
Tense. The usual clatter of Christmas breakfast was replaced with careful steps and hushed voices. Lila sat at the kitchen table with a mug of hot chocolate Ethan had made her, stirring it slowly, her eyes unfocused. I was just about to suggest we go for a walk when we heard a soft knock on the guest room door. It was Elaine. She didn't look like herself. Her usual perfectly coiffed hair was loose at the ends, and her face, so often drawn in tight, judgmental lines, seemed strangely tired. Smaller. She held a wrapped box in her hands, medium-sized, silver paper, no ribbon. Can I come in? She asked, voice low. I glanced at Ethan.
He didn't respond.
I nodded. She walked in slowly, knelt beside Lila's chair, and placed the box on the table. I forgot this yesterday, she said. Lila didn't reach for it. She just looked at the box, then back at Elaine. Elaine cleared her throat, then sat down on the other side of the table. Lila, she said, I made a mistake. A terrible one. Her voice wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't smooth. It cracked in the middle of the sentence. I was wrong, she continued. I told myself that family was about blood and history and rules that were never even mine to make. But I was wrong. Family is love. And from the moment you stepped into this house, you loved me like family, more than I deserved. I watched Lila's face. Her hands moved toward the box, but her eyes stayed locked on Elaine. She unwrapped the paper slowly, carefully, revealing a wooden box filled with a professional set of watercolor paints, a fresh sketchbook, and a card with her name written in script. Not just Lila. It said, to my granddaughter. Lila opened the card and read the inside silently. Then, after a long pause, she looked up at Elaine. You want me to draw you something? She asked softly. Elaine's eyes welled up. I would like that very much. Lila nodded. Okay. No smile. No running hug. Just a quiet word that carried more weight than any apology ever could. Elaine stood, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't say anything else. She turned and walked out of the room. When the door closed behind her, I looked at Ethan. He was still seated, still calm, but something in him had softened. You think it'll last? I asked. He shrugged. I don't know, but she knows the line now. Later that afternoon, Lila sat by the fireplace flipping through her new sketchbook. She hadn't spoken much since the gift, but her shoulders were no longer drawn tight. Her legs swung gently beneath the chair, and she hummed to herself again, just faintly. She drew quietly for hours. Animals.
Trees.
A small girl holding hands with two taller figures. Behind them, a house. And just at the edge of the page, standing slightly apart but facing toward them, a figure with silver hair. A sun beamed overhead with a smiling face. She titled the drawing Home. When she showed it to Ethan that night, he kissed her forehead and said, "That's exactly what we are." 3 days later, back at home, a small envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Just Elaine's neat handwriting on the front. Inside was an old photograph. Ethan at 5 years old, holding his mother's hand on a front porch. On the back, she had written in pen, "Family is who you fight for. I see that now. Thank you for fighting for her." Asterisk, asterisk. No signature. Just that. And maybe it wasn't everything, but it was something. The days after we returned home moved slowly, like the world was trying to catch up with everything that had happened. The holidays faded into the background. Decorations stayed up longer than usual, not out of cheer but inertia. I found myself standing at the kitchen sink more often, staring out the window while Lila painted at the table behind me. Ethan was quieter too, more focused, more deliberate. But not heavy. It was the quiet of something settled. Lila painted every afternoon, filling page after page with foxes, mountains, and little girls who looked like her, always surrounded by trees, animals, or small houses with warm lights in the windows. One day she drew a fox sitting at a table with a teacup, a string of lights above it, and a name tag next to the cup that read Grandma. I looked at the drawing and smiled. "Is that who I think it is?" I asked. She nodded. "That's her. She's learning." I bit my lip, unsure whether to laugh or cry. She's learning. That was the word Lila had chosen. Not she changed. Not she apologized. But she's learning. And it felt right. It was the kind of grace only a child could give. A grace that didn't demand perfection, but still required effort. Elaine started sending cards in the mail. Not often. Not dramatic. Just simple handwritten notes with stickers or small questions inside. "What colors do you like painting with this week? Do you want to name the birds outside my window?" One came with a packet of wildflower seeds and a note. "Maybe we can plant something together." Lila didn't always reply. Sometimes she just smiled and added the cards to her art box. But the messages kept coming.
And that was enough.
There were no big declarations. No sudden hugs or overnight transformations. But when Easter came, Elaine asked if we were celebrating at home, and when Lila said she was painting eggs, Elaine mailed a box of wooden ones and a note. "Save one for me." Lila did. One afternoon, I was cleaning out the guest room closet and found the manila folder Ethan had taken to Elaine's house that night. It was still there, still full, still neatly labeled. I pulled it out, sat on the bed, and flipped through the pages. Adoption records. Will revisions. Trust updates. All of it signed, notarized, official. There was no question. Lila was his daughter. In name. In law. In blood or not, in every way that mattered. Ethan walked in as I was staring at the papers. He sat beside me and rested his hand over mine. "I didn't tell you everything I said to her that night," he said quietly. I didn't look up. I waited. I told her that every time she treated Lila like a guest, she made a choice. And that from that night forward, every word, every silence, every look would be remembered. Not by me, by Lila. He paused. I told her that this was her last chance to be someone my daughter would want to draw into her world. That silence between us wasn't cold. It was reverent. "She chose to try," I said softly. Ethan nodded. And we chose not to look away again. He stood and kissed the top of my head, then left the room. That night, Lila brought me another drawing. This one had our family on a hillside. 3 people standing close together. And off to the side, a silver-haired woman sitting on a bench with a cup in her hand. The cup said, "Try on the side." In the sky above, instead of a sun, was a big watercolor heart. She didn't say anything when she handed it to me. She just placed it on the table, then returned to her brushes. And I realized something I hadn't before. This wasn't about forgiveness. Not really. It was about presence. About choosing to show up, again and again, even after the damage. Even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it feels like too much has been said. Elaine still called only once or twice a month. Sometimes the conversations were short, awkward. but they were real. She asked about Lila's school projects. She asked if foxes really do mate for life. And she always ended the call with the same words, words I never heard her say before. Tell Lila I love her. I didn't know if Lila believed it yet, but I knew she was hearing it. And for now, that was enough. It was late spring when Lila brought home a school assignment titled, Who is in your circle? The idea was simple. Draw the people who make you feel safe.
Loved.
Like you belong. I found her sitting at the dining table that afternoon, tongue peeking out slightly as she focused on the faces she was drawing. I didn't say a word. I just watched. She drew me and Ethan first, side by side, holding her hands. Then came her teacher, Mrs. Rowan. Her best friend, Kira. Our neighbor, Mr. Dean, and his big yellow dog. Then, toward the bottom corner, with less detail but still there, she drew Elaine, standing slightly off-center, holding a watering can. Later that evening, when she showed it to me, I asked gently, "What's she doing?" Lila looked at her drawing and said, "She's growing." I blinked. "Growing?" "Yeah," she said with a shrug. "Plants take time." That moment stuck with me. Elaine hadn't turned into the perfect grandmother overnight, but she was still trying, and Lila could see that. Children have a way of understanding things with more compassion than most adults ever will. They don't need big speeches. They just need consistency and effort. The kind that shows up in small ways, again and again. Elaine began sending art supplies in the mail. Not flashy ones. Thoughtful ones. Handmade paper from a little shop in Maine. A set of brushes with Lila's initials engraved. One package had a folded apron with Artist in Residence stitched on the front. She never asked for credit. She never asked for thank yous. She just started showing up in the ways she knew how. One Sunday, Lila and I were out walking when we passed a little girl with her grandmother on a bench. The girl was eating ice cream and pointing at ducks in the pond. I glanced at Lila, curious if the sight stirred anything in her. She just looked at the girl and said, "That's nice," then skipped ahead. I caught up to her and asked, "Do you miss having something like that?" She tilted her head. I didn't know I was supposed to. I felt something inside me tighten. Guilt, maybe. Or regret. All those years I had wished for picture-perfect moments, I hadn't realized my daughter never expected them in the first place. She just wanted love. Honest love. The kind that didn't skip over her or treat her like an extra. That night, Ethan and I sat on the porch watching the sun set over the hills. The sky bled orange and lavender, and the air carried the soft buzz of spring crickets. "I've been thinking," I said.
About what?
About that Christmas. About how I stayed quiet. How I didn't say what I should have. Ethan looked at me, calm as always. "You were protecting her in the only way you could," he said. "You didn't freeze because you didn't care. You froze because you were afraid saying the truth would make things worse. But I let her sit there," I whispered. "I let her believe she didn't matter." Ethan reached for my hand. "And then you spent every day after showing her she did." I closed my eyes. Let the words settle. "I just hope I never do that again," I said. "You won't," he replied, "because now you know the line." And he was right. That moment, that giftless morning, had drawn a line in all of us. One we would never cross again. Not with silence. Not with hesitation. That was the day we decided that peace without truth was no peace at all. One afternoon in early June, Lila received a surprise visit. Elaine pulled into the driveway in her old, clean sedan. She didn't come with gifts. She came with gardening gloves and a pack of seeds. "I thought maybe," she said, nervously standing at the porch, "we could plant something. If you want." Lila didn't answer right away. She looked at Ethan, then me. Then she walked down the steps and said, "The back garden gets the best sun." And just like that, they spent the next 2 hours planting lavender, wildflowers, and tiny tomato seedlings behind the house. I watched from the window, sipping tea, unable to stop the tears that formed in my throat. Elaine didn't say much, but she smiled when Lila handed her the watering can. They worked in silence side by side. Not perfectly close. Not instantly healed. but together. When they came back inside, Lila handed her a small painting. It was a picture of the two of them kneeling in the dirt, flowers blooming behind them, with the sun overhead. Elaine looked at the picture, held it in her hands like it was fragile glass, and whispered, "Thank you." Lila shrugged. "You earned it." And maybe that's what belonging really means. Not being granted a title, but earning a place through effort, through presence, through love and action. Elaine didn't become a new person. She just decided to become someone better. One small choice at a time. Summer came in gentle waves. Days were longer, nights were softer, and something unspoken had shifted in the rhythm of our lives. The pain of that Christmas still lived in the shadows, but it no longer sat at the center of our story. Instead, it had given way to small acts of repair. Quiet gestures that didn't ask for applause but meant everything. Lila spent most afternoons painting at the dining table. She had started working on a series she called People I Know. Each canvas was different. One had our neighbor's dog sitting by a picket fence. Another showed her teacher reading to a class of tiny animals. But one evening, I found her staring at a blank canvas, unmoving. Her hand hovered over a paintbrush, but she hadn't made a single stroke. "Stuck?" I asked, pulling up a chair beside her. She nodded. "Who's this one about?" She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "It's the hardest one." I waited. I knew she'd speak when she was ready. Finally, she said, "It's about someone I wanted to be different. Someone who wasn't, but maybe is trying now."
Elaine.
I didn't say it out loud, but we both knew. She stared at the canvas for another few minutes, then dipped her brush into a soft gray blue and made the first mark. A figure, standing alone in a field. Slowly, the image took form over the next few days. A woman with silver hair, holding a watering can. A tree growing beside her, branches reaching outward. No flowers. No crowd. Just space. Space to become something. When it was done, Lila didn't frame it. She didn't hang it up. She wrapped it in brown paper, tied it with twine, and asked me if we could drive to Elaine's house. "She doesn't know we're coming," I warned gently. "I know," she said. "That's okay." The drive was quiet. Lila held the painting in her lap, like it was fragile treasure. When we pulled into Elaine's gravel driveway, she was outside trimming roses. She looked surprised but not unsettled when she saw us. Lila got out first. "Hi," she said simply. Elaine wiped her hands on her gardening apron and walked slowly to the car.
"Hi, sweetheart."
"I wasn't expecting." "I made this," Lila said, holding out the wrapped canvas. "For you." Elaine took it with shaking hands. Her eyes flicked toward me, then back to Lila. "Can I open it now?" Lila nodded. Elaine unwrapped the paper with care. When she saw the image, she didn't speak. She just stood there, lips parted, one hand pressed against her chest. "I didn't paint flowers," Lila said, breaking the silence. "Because they don't grow unless the roots are strong first." Elaine looked at her, eyes wet. "It's beautiful." Lila shrugged. "It's not finished." Elaine looked down again. "No. I was thinking, maybe you could paint the rest. If you want." Something broke in Elaine's expression. Not in a painful way. In a way that released something long held in. She nodded. "I'd like that very much." That night, back at home, Lila didn't say much. But as I tucked her into bed, she whispered, "Do you think people can really change?" I kissed her forehead. "I think people can try. And sometimes, trying is what makes all the difference." She nodded, satisfied with the answer, and drifted off to sleep. Ethan and I stayed up late that night, talking quietly in the kitchen. "She gave Elaine a second chance," I said. "She gave all of us a second chance," Ethan replied.
And he was right.
Because it wasn't just Elaine who had changed. We all had. The silence we once used to keep the peace had been replaced by something louder. Truth. And it had made space for something even greater.
Grace.
By the time autumn rolled around, our home felt warmer in ways that had nothing to do with the thermostat. Leaves painted the sidewalks in hues of fire and gold, and the soft scent of cinnamon began to sneak into the kitchen. Lila's sketchbooks were now stacked in a neat tower beside the dining room window, each one filled cover to cover. Some pages were soft and dreamy, others were sharp and direct. But they all said the same thing, in their own way. She had found her voice. It was a Thursday when the envelope arrived. Thick cream paper, delicate script, no return address. Inside was a card, printed with embossed gold leaves, and a name, Elaine Calloway. A personal invitation to an art exhibition. On the back, a handwritten note. Asterisk Lila, I've added your name to the guest list. You don't have to come, but if you do, you'll see what I've been working on. Thank you for the tree. I'm learning how to grow. Asterisk. Lila read the note 3 times before setting it gently on the table. She didn't say much, just picked up a pencil and began sketching a tiny tree in the corner of her math notebook. Ethan was cautious. You don't have to go, he told her that evening. There's no pressure. You've done more than enough. But Lila shook her head. She's trying. I want to see. The night of the exhibit, we dressed carefully. Lila chose her purple velvet dress and wore the necklace Elaine had sent months earlier, a silver charm shaped like a paintbrush. She stood taller in it, not because it made her proud, but because it reminded her that she had changed someone else's story. The gallery buzzed with quiet conversation and soft music. The air smelled of lavender and old wood. Walls lined with framed watercolors told stories without words, images of childhood, of memories, of places that might have been real or imagined. Then we reached the final room, a series titled Asterisk, Beginnings. Asterisk. The first painting stopped me in my tracks. It was the field from Lila's painting, the woman with the watering can. But now the tree had buds, tiny green sprouts reaching for light. The second canvas showed a child's hand clasping the woman's. No faces, just the gesture. The third, an empty chair and a sketchbook resting on its seat, as if waiting. Lila didn't say a word, but I watched her eyes trace every detail. Then she walked over to a small podium and signed the guest book, her handwriting neat and deliberate. Asterisk, thank you for seeing me. I see you too. Asterisk. Elaine appeared moments later. She looked unsure, holding a paper cup of cider with trembling hands. But when Lila turned toward her, their eyes met, and for a moment, the noise around us disappeared. I wasn't sure you'd come, Elaine said, her voice barely audible. I almost didn't, Lila replied honestly. Elaine nodded. I would have understood. I know, Lila said. But I didn't come for you. Elaine blinked, taken aback. I came for the girl in the painting, Lila explained. She deserves to see what happened next. That was when Elaine stepped forward, not to hug, not to force anything, but to kneel in front of her and whisper, I'm sorry I made you wait. I'm still learning how to be the kind of person you deserve. Lila tilted her head. You're not done yet, but it's better now. Elaine smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. It's better because of you. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Guests came and went. Lights dimmed. And when we left, Lila held her head high, her fingers laced with mine, her voice steady. Next year, she said as we reached the car, I think we should invite her to our Christmas. Ethan and I exchanged a glance. You're sure? I asked. She nodded. It's time for a new tradition. And just like that, we knew something sacred had shifted. Not forced, not sudden, but earned. Not a perfect ending, but a real one. That Christmas, the house looked different. We didn't do matching pajamas or a 12-foot tree. There were no embroidered napkins or chalkboard labels on cheeses. We kept it simple. Lila helped string popcorn garlands for the mantel. Ethan played quiet jazz instead of carols. And for the first time, we let the day unfold without expectations, just hope. Elaine arrived just after noon. She rang the doorbell like a guest, not assuming a key. When the door opened, she stood on the porch holding a pie wrapped in a towel and a thin package tucked under her arm. No makeup, no designer coat, just Elaine as she was. A woman learning, a woman trying. Lila answered the door herself. She didn't rush. She didn't smile wide. She just nodded and stepped aside, letting her in without a word. That was enough. Lunch was simple: roasted vegetables, chicken pot pie, warm bread. Conversation flowed in cautious streams at first, like people crossing a frozen pond unsure of the ice. But no one fell through. Lila talked about her art class. Ethan shared a memory about building snow forts as a boy. Elaine laughed. Really laughed. And I realized I hadn't heard her sound that unguarded in years. When it came time for gifts, we didn't make a spectacle. We handed them out casually, one at a time, no stage, no audience. Elaine handed Lila the thin package. "It's not much," she said quietly, "but it's just for you." Lila opened it carefully. Inside was a canvas, blank. High quality, already stretched and prepped. Taped to the corner was a note. Asterisk for the next chapter. "Paint it when you're ready. I'll be watching, but I won't peek." Asterisk. Lila held it in her lap for a long moment. Then she set it gently beside her and whispered, "Okay." Later that night, after the pie was gone and the sun had dipped below the trees, Elaine asked if she could walk through Lila's sketchbooks. They sat on the living room rug together, pages spread between them like a tapestry. Lila explained each drawing, where it came from, what she was thinking. Elaine listened without interrupting. One page held a drawing I hadn't seen before. A garden bench. On it, a woman with silver hair sat reading to a little girl with wild curls. They weren't touching, but they were facing each other. The title scrawled beneath it was asterisk, eventually. Asterisk. Elaine touched the page, then looked at Lila. "That's a hopeful one." Lila shrugged. "It's not done yet." Elaine didn't ask what that meant. She just nodded. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the kitchen sipping tea. Ethan joined me, stretching his arms and exhaling the kind of breath that only comes when the heart has been holding something too long. "She's okay," he said, meaning Lila. "She's better than okay," I replied. "She's seen something hard and didn't let it change who she is. She let it shape who she wants to be." He nodded and leaned against the counter. "And Elaine?" I didn't answer at first. Then I looked at the blank canvas still resting near the tree. "She's painting too, just slower." The following days were quiet. Lila painted in the mornings, read in the afternoons. Elaine called once a week. She didn't push. She just asked about books, art supplies, squirrel sightings. Once, she mailed a postcard from a museum with a scribbled note. Asterisk, "This reminded me of you. Not because of the colors, but because of the courage it took to paint them." Asterisk. Spring came. Flowers bloomed along the fence. Lila planted a seedling in the backyard, the same kind of tree she'd once painted. She named it Fern. One Saturday, we found her sitting beside Fern with her sketchbook, drawing 2 chairs and a teacup between them. When I asked her who the second chair was for, she looked up and smiled. Not a big smile, just enough. "She hasn't earned tea yet," she said. "But she can sit with me while it cools." That was Lila. Not bitter. Not broken. Just aware. Just open. She had rewritten the definition of family for all of us. No longer built by default,
but by choice.
And we chose each other. Every time.